voice seems to work a little better that way. Yes, sir. I see that. All right. Yep.
He's talking about the question.
Okay, we'll start with that. I gave a little assignment, and like I said, nobody had to do it. I would like for you to do it, but nobody had to do it. And I asked y'all to read Genesis chapter 4, verses 6, or chapter 4 through chapter 6, and then look at chapter 6, verse 8, and tell me what that verse meant to you once you had read, verses 4 through 6. And thankfully, Jessica reminded me that I did not put that out to remind everybody. Thank you very much. But anyway, if you've got something, some have already given them to me. If you got something, just get it to me. Like I said, this wasn't something that I was just going to be yelling out or trying to embarrass anybody with anything like that. I was just curious what your thought was, and it's in hopes that I can. It may lead into another Wednesday night study of some sort. So, if you want yours, read out and said, I'm the one that did this, then by all means, you're welcome to read it out to folks. But that wasn't the point. Huh?
I didn't know it was supposed to last.
Well, that was the general idea. But like I said, the big thing is if you read it, that's good. And do what you can for me. I appreciate all that. And one thing I did like about it, at least, is it kind of made us do a little Bible reading, which is a good habit to get into. And it is something that you got to get yourself acclimated to doing. But anyway, all right. So what we're going to do, if you got something, like I said, get it to me sometime tonight. I appreciate that. We're going to get right on into what we're doing tonight. Tonight, I have a question for you as usual. And here it is. Must a person, an individual, a human being, must they have a Bible or a preacher or a church to go to heaven? Hold on, what I say, we raise our hand. Yes, sir. Okay. All right. Okay. But you'll see. But your answer is no. You don't have to have those things. All right. Yes, I will. Okay. All right. So the consensus here is that you don't have to have a Bible. You don't have to have a preacher. You don't have to have a church. And you can still be saved. All right. Now, that takes you to the next part of this question. Aboriginal peoples, we would call them here in America the Indians. They would be the Aborigine in Australia. They would be jungle tribes in South Africa or South America and Indonesia, places like this. Some of these places still have unreached tribes and stuff like that. These people have never seen a Bible. They've never seen a preacher. And they've never seen a church. Some people, there's some that don't know, have never heard the name God, Jehovah. They've never heard of Jesus. They've never heard any of these words. They've never read a Bible of any kind, to any part. They've never been in a church. They've never seen a preacher or had somebody preach to them and tell them about the saving power of Jesus Christ or about the Creator that we know is God, the Jehovah. All right. With that said, can those people go to heaven? Yeah. Can they be saved?
Yep. Yes.
All right. Now, again, how?
Because they just gotta let God speak to them. This nature. Some.
Somebody else? Yes, sir.
They could probably be like Moses, because didn't Moses come out and say, like, there's only one God, and then later on God
South America, in Brazil, that consists of one man. He's the only one that is left in his tribe. All of the tribe members of that small tribe have died, and he is the only one left. Now, he knows there's other people out there who don't know much about him. They've never been able to encounter him because he will kill you. He will defend himself.
Is that good?
Well, no, they try to leave him alone. He's the only one left because they have killed all the rest of them, or they died from natural causes, not being able to keep up. So there's an island off of India that is still, the tribes there are left alone. They literally throw spears and shoot bows and arrows at any aircraft that comes by. I mean, there are peoples that literally have never heard the gospel, that have never had a Bible, they have never any of these things. Now you tell me that they can go to heaven, they can be saved. Why? I mean, how defend your stance? Somebody. Yeah, well, that's a simple answer. That's not a defense. That's not apologetics.
Well, we want to know what's right or wrong.
Okay, that actually goes into just what we're talking about knowing right and wrong. So about that, we're talking about that. Anybody else got anything?
But knowing right and wrong, isn't that almost like similar to the age of accountability, kind of like, I don't know, I know you talked about this before, that God is present through his creation,
Right.
which makes him available to all.
Absolutely. And that leads right into what we're going to do. This would be, yes sir, did you have something?
How was that a good heaven when they were
That's kind of the
That's
question
just
I
not
was
knowing
looking
his
for.
name.
Because I know, but the Bible says, Jesus has to be my Lord and my Lord.
That's right. That's right. And that's kind of, I was kind of hoping to hear that point brought up. As if they don't know Jesus, then how can they be saved? So let me, without any further ado, let's jump into a few verses. I want to go over a few verses with you. This is to help you to understand that being saved and being a Christian is really not about things we say. It's not about coming to church. It's not about the way it looks like we are. That's not what it's about. It's not about that. So let's start, and we're going to start with creation stuff. We've read this before, but I'm telling you, when something grabs a hold of you, it never gets old to you. So we're going to read Psalms chapter 19, verses 1 through 6. And actually, I'm not even going to go through 6. We'll go through 1 through 3. Just the Psalms 19, verses 1 through 3. Here we go. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech, nor language, where their voice is not heard. So it's kind of like it's been brought up just a little bit about nature being the preacher and that kind of thing. God is present in everything. He's present. But let's keep on going. I want to read through, like I said, there's a few verses here that we're just going to go through before we kind of get into the discussion of it. Let's go now to the book of Romans. And if you're ever looking for something to study, a book of the Bible to study, and you've not done so, or maybe you've done it before, it's been a while. The book of Romans, as Adrian Rogers puts it, is the constitution of Christianity. It lays out the basis of Christianity for a Gentile or anybody that's not a Jew. It's a wonderful book to study. I encourage you to do so. But let's start in Romans chapter 1. We'll be in the first chapter of Romans. We're going to first look at verses 19 and 20. Verses 19 and 20 say this: because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. That says this: Because everything that can be known about God, everything that can be known about God can be known without a preacher, or without a Bible, or without a church. It can be known. Like somebody brought that, I think you said a while ago, because he wants you to be. And that's true. That is true. Everything we can know about God, we can know without His stuff, because He has shown us. And He said, but it's so much more than that. He's shown us through the invisible things that, or Himself, that we don't see, but we see His works. We see what He has done. We can say it with His hands, or we can say through His speech, or whatever you want to say, but God has done. He created everything around us. And in doing so, that gives us, we can see those things that have been created. And there is an innate ability within us to understand that it took somebody, some being to create all those things that we see. We can't see that person or that being that created it, but we know within us. Each and every human being. This is why I say there is no such thing as an atheist. There may be an agnostic, but there's no atheist. Every human being that lives knows something had to make it, because we all have the ability to understand that nothing or something cannot come from nothing. So we see all those things that's out here. Something had to bring that. Now sometimes we delude ourselves into these different ideas of how that is or whatever it is, but the truth is within us we can understand. By seeing the visible things of creation, we understand that invisible creator. Paul made that very clear for us. And we do have that. And he went on to say that the cause of that, guess what? Nobody has an excuse, including that single soul tribesman in the jungles of the Amazon that has never spoke to another human being outside of the few people that we've been in his tribe when he was young. He's never spoke to anybody yet. He is without excuse. Yes, sir.
How did God
That's a whole. We have to actually go on that one. That is a great question, and we will devote the night to talking about that. We'll get to that one. Good question. Let's continue on with this part first, okay? All right. Flip. Well, from that, I don't even have to flip. It's Romans chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 14 through 16. Romans 2, verses 14 through 16, and it says this. For when the Gentiles, and the Gentiles is simply anybody that was not a Jew. So that means we're Gentiles. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, or in other words, they didn't have the 10 Commandments that Moses gave to the Jews. People that have never seen or heard the 10 Commandments, is who he's talking about. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature, or can just naturally do the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. All right. Oh, yeah. So what it said right there is that there are peoples that have never read the Bible, has never heard a preacher preach to them or a missionary speak to them, that have never been set a foot in a church, yet they know killing is wrong. They know that lying is wrong. But I know what I'm saying is there are people that have never done this, that within them they know this. They know that it's wrong to kill. It's wrong to lie. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong. They understand this. That's from a conscience. We have a conscience that tells us these things. Now, many would like to tell you that that's just a good and bad thing. And the further we go away from God, the further you will find that you will literally find scientists that will tell you, well, there really is no right and wrong. But we know there's right and wrong. know when we're doing wrong. Now, occasionally we do things that are wrong that we don't understand is wrong, and that happens, and that's a whole other story, but we know basically that there's a difference between right and wrong and obedience. That is something that God puts in us, and that goes back to that knowledge and understanding. By seeing the things that we can see of creation, we understand that the unseeable Creator is what made that. And it's that same thing. And it also tells us that these people who have never heard or seen or read or done this or was not a Jew or whatever, they understand the Ten Commandments. Because the Ten Commandments are, without any doubt, the basis of any moral society's code. Whether you knew it or not, that's what law, in almost every society ever, the laws are based on the Ten Commandments. Even in societies where they don't know about the Ten Commandments.
And that's because we inherently know that those things are wrong.
We inherently, in a sense we inherently know, but it's more, it is instilled. I think is a better word. It's instilled by God on us as humans.
And that's why we apply it to our
code. That's exactly right. Now, as we become a society that removes away from God as any knowledge of God, then we see that's when we start seeing that breakdown. That's what happens. Now, let's keep on moving. Next, let's look, go back a chapter or a book and go to the book of Acts. Let's look at chapter 17. Acts chapter 17, verse 23. Anybody tell me who wrote the book of Acts? Who? Luke. Yeah, that who part wasn't, I mean, I can't hear, you're right. But that wasn't why I was who. Anyway, Acts chapter 17, verse 23. Listen to this. For as I passed by and beheld, and this is Paul, that Stacy's talking about. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, and this is when he's in Athens, I found an altar with this inscription: to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. Now when it says ignorantly worship, it's not saying you people are stupid. It's saying that you unknowingly are doing something. Now, the Athenians, if you know anything about ancient Greece, or if you're a history buff, you'll understand that in Athens, this is where the great thinkers come together. I mean, they literally, men that were unbelievably intelligent. They'd come to Mars Hill. And this is where Paul was at. They would come to Mars Hill and they would sit around and somebody would talk about something that they had determined, they had figured out, something that they had an epiphany about. And they would discuss these things. And then you would either, they would discuss it around with each other. No, these were intelligent men. These were your college professors, but not the ones at Chipola, the college professors at Harvard, at Stanford. I mean, these guys were the top of brainiacs. They were also the top of the Greek religions, the mythical gods of Greece. These people, you had the highest of the high in the Greek gods' worlds and things like that. These men this is where they come to. Well, they literally had a place to worship the unknown God. And the reason they had that there was because they said, surely there's a God that we don't know about. So we're going to dedicate something to that God, because they had about 1,000 different gods, probably more than that they would worship. Yet, they understood, they still knew in all of their, as in Romans 1 says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, or no, they became too smart in the world to any longer be able to receive the understanding of God. So what they did, they said, to the unknown God. But you know who the unknown God was? It was the living God. It was the only God that's real. It's the Creator God. So even people that didn't know, they knew. They didn't understand, but they knew. But it's kind of confusing, but it goes back to there is no excuse to anybody. But they knew. Even though they didn't know he was called God. We understand within us. All right, let me ask you this. All right, you see the river flowing by, right? We all like the river, but I mean, we see it. Where's it come from?
Water.
No, where's it come from?
Precipitation.
No, where's it come from? I mean, where's it come? No, there's a source.
Mountains.
No. See, you don't know where it comes from, but you know it's there. You know it's there, but you just don't know. Well, no, I can tell you right exactly where it comes from, but that's because I've studied and I've learned and I've been given a little more wisdom and understanding on that. But you can't tell me where it comes from.
What does it actually come
Can't tell me where the source is. It's in Clay Hatch. It's a spring out of the ground. All right, that's where it springs up out of the ground and it starts flowing down this way. And by the time we get here, it's got rain has come in on it. It's got other springs and other creeks and other things that has helped make it bigger and bigger. You see this Chattahoochee, but you didn't know where it was. These men, they knew within them there was a creator God, a living God, but they didn't know who he was. So they built an altar to the unknown God. Now you see what I'm saying? You kind of understand a little bit better? I mean, that it's really there, even though they didn't really know, but they knew. They knew it existed, they just didn't know what it was. Look back in the book of Romans. Romans chapter 10, verse 14. Well, yeah, Romans chapter 10, verse 14, and then we'll jump down to verse 18. Romans 10 and 14 says this, how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? So Paul's saying to them, he says, all right, so how do these people that don't have a preacher, that don't have a Bible, that don't have a church, don't have a synagogue, how will they know? I mean, he's asking that question. He does, but the thing is he decides that we all know. No one has had this excuse. No, not a single human being that has ever lived from Adam to right now has an excuse. We all know about God. So he was asking this question. How? Well, down in verse 18 it says this. But I say, have they not heard? Yes, verily. Their sound went into all the earth, and their words unto the end of the world. Creation is what he's talking about. That comes straight back from Psalms 19. That's what Paul was basically, he's pulling from Psalms 19 and he's talking about that. He's saying that every living human being in the history of this world has no excuse. They know because God is present. Even though we can't see him, he is present. He's all around us. He's always there. There was no excuse. There is no excuse. Now let me ask you this, and I think this was kind of brought up. How can they go to heaven if they don't know how to live as the Bible tells them? If they don't, just like I said, if they don't know about Jesus and surrendering your life to Jesus. Because they don't, obviously, if they don't have a Bible, somebody can tell them about it, then how can they know? So how? And what about, don't we have certain ways we're supposed to live as Christians? Things that we're supposed to do or things that we're not supposed to do? And asking for forgiveness, as we do. Hey, y'all, the closer you get to God, the more forgiveness you're going to ask for. It's not going to be a one-time thing. You're going to ask all the time, Lord, forgive me. Not because you're scared of going to hell, but because you want to be separated from sin. You don't want to sin. You want it to be away from you. It literally feels nasty to you. And that's a wonderful feeling when you start feeling that way. You start desiring to not sin. You're going to still sin. You're never going to get past that. Not long as we're here. But you will start desiring not to. And it'll feel, you'll want to ask forgiveness simply to, as Paul said, to crucify myself every day so I can be more like Jesus each day. And I can live more like him. And you're going to want to do that. But if we don't have the Bible, if we don't have a preacher, and if we don't have those things, how can we do those things that that we're supposed to do as Christians to go to heaven. Do you know? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, let's look. First thing I want to do is I want to read a couple of things to you. Real quick, Mike here. Any of y'all know who the Iroquois is?
Yes.
Who are the Iroquois?
Have you ever been to India?
All right. Well, all right. They're an Indian tribe. From where? Hold up. Do you know that? Hold on. Hold on. What? Wendy, where are they from?
Wasn't the Iroquois in Florida?
No.
I was trying to go back to my fourth grade.
Little off.
history.
Iroquois. All right. One more
Was
time.
it in
Oh, Carson.
No.
Nope.
Go ahead, Carson.
She's right.
No.
No.
No, that's a pretty good guess. I know where that's coming from. Wisconsin? All right, let's get over this. The Iroquois are basically, they were Indians from the Northeast. They would have been one of the first tribes. And really, the Iroquois was a tribe and later became a confederacy. You'd have to talk to the history to get you fully on into that. But the tribe of the Iroquois, the real Iroquois were from the upper Northeast into Canada and things like that, or over around the, I guess that would be Lake, was it Erie or Huron, whichever one it is. It's over east. But anyways, listen to this. This is from an Iroquois website, talking about their religious beliefs and ceremonies. This is a nation that did not know anything about the Bible or Christianity or anything like that. But listen, the Iroquois religious beliefs are centered on an omniscient Great Spirit, who they believe is also their creator. They are strong proponents of anthropomorphism or animated nature and seasons. Many Iroquois, now that they've encountered, the Europeans when we first came here and things like that, many Iroquois are followers of Christianity. They show great respect and reverence at the mention of Handsome Lake, which was the Iroquois prophet. That's who, basically, it's who they were described as the one that wasn't the prophet, like a prophet. The Iroquois people are of the view that ordinary humans can indirectly communicate with the Great Spirit by burning tobacco, which carries their prayers to the lesser spirits of God of good. Dreams are regarded dreams as important supernatural signs which express the desire of the soul. The Iroquois pays serious attention to dream interpretation, and fulfillment of the dream is of paramount importance to an individual. The Iroquois people carry out 6 major ceremonies of the year, which let's go on. The Iroquois believed in an afterlife, in that their spirit would join the good spirit in the place where the good spirit lived, provided the Iroquois honored the good spirit and lived a good life. The point of what I read that for right there was to let you hear of an Indian tribe that had never encountered the Bible and Christianity, and even though they didn't have any of that, did you hear the similarities in their religious beliefs to Christianity? Even though they had been separated for whatever reason from the rest of society and the world, it could have been from ancestors that were evil, or it could have been from maybe some that had gotten cut off and wandered away and got lost for some other reason, whatever the reason. Even though it wasn't exactly what our Bible says, it was the same basis of our Bible, because they understand, they feel within them that God existed, that there was a creator. They knew this, they understood it. And here's what I want you to hear. What? Well, they learned after they learned it. And then when they first got there, the Iroquois languages were, I'm trying to remember the term for it. There is an actual term for the type of language it is. The language group it fell into, I don't remember now. But this one I do want you to, yes sir.
I don't think that.
That's pretty awesome. We'll get him here to do that sometime. Anyways, this is one little thing that I do want you to hear. This was something written to me by a cousin of mine about a year ago after we had been talking about something like this. And she said this. She said, Shane McGowan, there was a missionary that spoke at our church years ago. She went and lived with a tribe in the Amazon jungle that was unreached, or a tribe that had not had Anglo-Saxon or European contact. She got to know them and talk to them about God. One night, she went up, this missionary, she went up to a lookout to see the stars, and there was a lady from the tribe there, and that lady said, "Thank you for coming and telling us about that." And here's the key. I always knew there was someone there, I just never knew his name. God can and will reach people anywhere. There is that, and this is my cousin that wrote this, but Wendy. Well, that was from a testimony that was given at her church years ago by a missionary that had commissioned the tribal peoples in the Amazon jungle. She knew, the woman said, "I knew there was somebody. I just didn't know what his name was." So see, God does make himself known. And he don't just make himself known to those of us that read the Bible and have a Bible. Listen to what 1 John chapter 2, verse 2 says. This is 1 John 2 and 2. It says this. "And he, Jesus, is the propitiation for our sins, the standing for us. And not for ours only, those of us that hear and know, but also for the sins of the whole world." Jesus didn't die for those of us that would read the Bible. Jesus didn't die for those of us that would preach or teach or whatever. He didn't die for the people that was going to go to church. He died for every person that ever would be born. Well, I don't even want to say that. For every person that would ever be conceived. As those that don't make it out of the womb, God knows them too. And he died. Jesus died for those as well. And it says right there that even those that don't know, even those that don't hear, he died for them. That in John, when we make sure that people understood, that's God's love. Read behind John. You know what? Just read the whole Bible. It's great. And that's good. Keep doing it. Don't ever stop. Let's look real quick. And I'm about to wrap it up. I'm sure some of you are ready to go. I'm just getting excited, but that's all right. Let's look in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12. The 12th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. And I want to read to you verses 47 and 48. And this is where we start to look at the difference between those of us that didn't have Bibles and come to church and do all that, and those that don't have that opportunity. Verses 47 and 48 of Luke chapter 12 says this. "And that servant which knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself, neither did according to the will of his Lord, shall be beaten with many stripes." Or in other words, he will be punished. He is held very accountable. Verse 48 says this. "But he that didn't know, that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes," or in other words, he still did it wrong, but he didn't really know that he was doing wrong, well, he still has to be beaten, but with few stripes. "For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the Lord." That saith that, hold on just a minute before, that, why did he die for it? That's why he died for us. A bunch. We know a lot more. Some of us know more than others. Some of us have better opportunity because God has given us gifts to know. The more you know, the more God lets you see and understand and know, the more responsible you are. You'll not ever doubt that. Be careful when you ask God to teach you something, learn you something, because he will, and then he'll hold you responsible for that knowledge. Then you are responsible for whatever he's taught you, and you're responsible for the consequences of not doing what you're supposed to do right. Now, for those tribesmen or whatever that never heard the name Jesus, that never heard Jehovah, that never heard God, that don't know exactly who it is and never been told, they're not held so responsible for some of the things that they do or don't do. They're not held responsible for not coming to church Sunday morning or Wednesday night. They're not held responsible for know, like we talked about, that there is something. And they do have that understanding that there is things that I shouldn't do. And that's the things that they're held responsible for. That's what they are held responsible for. That's the standard at which they are judged. Now, for those of us that do know, we know that Matthew 6:33 tells us, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. So, our first job is to follow through with the things that we do know. We're supposed to do the things that God wants us to do, that he leads us to do, the knowledge that he gives us. We're responsible for those things. We should seek his kingdom first. Everything else comes back behind that. The more you know, the more you understand, the more responsible you are for doing those things and reaching out and doing whatever it is God places in your heart to do. The less you know, the less responsible you're held, but you're still responsible for the things that you will and do. And that's the case for those folks that ain't never seen that Bible. Think they have to have that. Now, and this will wrap things up for you. You don't even have to turn here. Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 18. If you've ever read Ecclesiastes without really understanding what you're reading, Ecclesiastes, you kind of get thinking, man, this is all gloom and doom. The point of Ecclesiastes is Solomon is trying to contrast the understanding. He was amazing. According to the Bible, he was the smartest man, human being, world being, that ever lived on this earth. He would have been smarter than Albert Einstein, than Bill Gates. Then he would have, if we believe the Bible, then we know that we understand that there was more wisdom in the mind of Solomon, worldly, than any other human being that had ever lived or ever would live. And that's the truth. That's how wise Solomon was. How smart and intelligent he could come up with things. I mean, he literally, it alludes to the fact that he cataloged, or in other words, he wrote down and described every known animal, bird, mammal, reptile, everything that was on the earth. That's in the Bible. But he did that. That's how this guy was so intelligent he could do anything. I mean, but in the book of Ecclesiastes, you can find out that Solomon shows what all the worldly stuff does versus godly wisdom. And that's what the whole point of Ecclesiastes is. But Ecclesiastes 1:18 says this: for in much wisdom is much grief. And he that increases his knowledge, he also increases his sorrow. And you go, wow. And here's the thing. The more you know, there are times the more heavy it weighs on us. Does that make sense to anybody? When we start getting bogged down into things of the world and we come to understand more things, and we start getting a bit dejected about things, that's because we're looking at it from our human side. We're looking at it from the natural side. And that's what Solomon was saying here. He said, hey, I know basically everything. I mean, he's the guy that could say, he was the real know-it-all. You know, even though I've been called Google by my wife and children, it's not for real. It's that, you know, they're kind of making fun of me. Solomon would have been the real Google. He would have been the guy that actually knew it all. And he knew, he knew, but here was the thing, he realized that even though he was so wise and knew so much, all it produced in him was sorrow, grief. It made him sad. No, not as long as you let it all to God always. You let God do more than God. So let's look at it. Let's look at it quick so I can wrap this up and see all we got. If we look at it from the man's side, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have grief, you're going to have sorrow. But if you'll look at it, the way Jeremiah looked at it, it would be like this. If you let your wisdom and your knowledge be like Jeremiah's wisdom and knowledge, or you let God's wisdom be your lead and most important thing, you'll experience this. Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says this: then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. It's kind of the same thing that Solomon was saying is, I just had grief and sorrow from this. Jeremiah had grief and sorrow. It's known as the weeping prophet. But you know what? When he decided he wasn't going to tell nobody else, nobody's listening, turned it back to God, and he said this. But his word, God's word, was in my heart as a burning fire, shut up in my bones, and I was weary for forbearing, and I could not stay. If you'll let your wisdom be God's wisdom, if you let God direct your wisdom and your intelligence in your life, that grief and sorrow, it can be gone and be replaced with a burning desire, with happiness, with joy, with those things. Because when we let God be first, not ourselves be first, then we're all guilty of that. But when we let God be first, then it don't produce grief and sorrow. Or the wisdom that we get produces so much joy in us that we will tell everybody about it. Last one. In the book of Romans again, chapter 10. I'll read to you verses 20 and 21. But Esaias, which is Isaiah, is very bold and said, I was found of them that sought me not. I was made manifest unto them that asked not after me. But to Israel he said, all day long I have stretched forth my hands unto a disobedient and gainsaying people. Isaiah was saying, and Paul was saying, you know, there are people that don't have the opportunities that we have to know God, and yet they strive and they do all they can to find God, to come to know God. And then you have folks like us who have every opportunity to know God. We see it, we know it, we let it become something that's just, Romans 1 talks about the fact that we knew God, but we didn't need God where he was supposed to be. We didn't give him his glory that he was supposed to do. Eventually, he's not known him. We see that in our country. We also can see that in families sometimes. The fact that families start off maybe as strong Christian families, and then you go, sometimes not very far at all, but you go generationally away, and God was not kept first and foremost in the center. And eventually, you have a family that don't even know who God is, even though they had an ancestor who knew God passionately. We have to believe God in this place. We have to keep God first. And he's in everything that's around us, but we'll miss that if we don't do the part. And it's not works to save us, but it is our desire to know God that is important for us. It is important for those around us, and that's for sure. It's all so. It's important for those that don't even know. So when you're praying, and you're praying for a shotgun, who we pray for? Pray for those that don't even get know, that have never heard. Pray that God reveals to them the reality of you. He died for them too. Look at that. It's like, all right. Anybody got any questions, comments, anything? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, so all of this was talking about how everyone has the opportunity, but in the same sense, we all have the opportunity to accept or reject. There is no in between.
There is no in between. You don't get to ride the fence. And that's the, I mean, you know, some of the harsh realities, because there's harsh realities in everything, some of the harsh realities of Christianity is the fact that you don't get to ride the fence. And the more, and that's why I say, you know, I remember the saying, you know, be careful what you ask for. Well, what that really means is, when I ask God to give me something, to make something of me, that, you know, say God, give me patience. I want to be a more patient person. A lot of times people talk about the fact that, watch out, you might just get what you ask for. Lord, you are going to get what you ask for. But you know what? It's not that the bad things make patience. It's that the bad things allow the patience to come out. And those patients come out of you based on your relationship with God, that kind of thing. So, but there is no right. You have to, and once you are given wisdom, and once you know, you are responsible for that. So you can say you didn't know, but God knows that you know. You can't make him out. And if you know, then you are responsible. And that's something, that's it. It's real. It's very real. But yeah, you're right. There's no in between. There's no gray area with God. It's yes or no. It's that simple.
There's more grief, I think, than grief rather than
Well, there is, no, the grief is unbearable. That's why Solomon was talking about so much grief and sorrow, was because he knew. He had been there. I mean, what did Solomon ask for when God told him to give him anything? He asked for it. And for what reason? He wanted wisdom so that he might be a fair judge to the people of Israel. Holy moly, that was completely nothing for his own sake. That was a selfless act. And he wanted that wisdom, so he had that wisdom, but then he was held responsible for that wisdom. If you know much about Solomon, and most of us know that Solomon was wise and rich and had this awesome temple that he built and all these things, do you know that the majority of Solomon's life was basically an evil king? He fell away from God. And he was rich. He wrote about those things.
There's scientific evidence, if I'm not mistaken, that proves that the more intelligent you are, that the harder it is
To be
to maintain a relationship with the Lord.
Well, and
Or
yes.
a higher power, I should say. But that's how the scientific evidence.
And you're right. And again, that's usually looked at from a worldly stance, because it's not that the smarter you are, the harder it is to know God. The problem is that the smarter you are, it's harder for you to let go and get things over my God.
But that is like,
And
it is a fact.
And that is a fact. There's no doubt about it. We depend upon ourselves way too much the more intelligent we are. And that creates sorrow, and that creates grief, and those kind of things, just like you're saying. That's exactly true. So when you ride the fence, anytime you ride the fence, it means I know something that I'm not doing. That's what riding the fence actually is. I know where I should be, but I'm going to be where I want to be. And that's what that is. And that's why riding the fence is so grievous. And that's the truth. Anybody else? We're going to get that rescheduled once we have more stability and everything. So it will be soon. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else for this? Well, understand, you know what God tells us, or the Bible tells us, are the needs of human beings? What are the needs of a human being as described in the Bible? What are the physical needs of a human being? Boom! No, there's two things that the Bible tells us are needs that God will give us. And that is food and clothes. And now when I say clothes, I ain't talking about what we got on. I'm talking about coverage. When we talk about clothes, we're talking about something to keep you warm and dry. That's God's food. That is the only two things. God don't say, God does not, or the Bible does not consider a house a need. And it's not a need. Physically, we need food and water, and we need something to keep us warm against the elements, dry against the elements. That's what the Bible says we need. So, yeah, simplicity. If it comes down to simplicity, all of us fail. So, because we are, and we're blessed, though. I mean, we're a blessed nation, and we're blessed, and we're able to have more and do more. But remember that. So, when you do have a friend or you see somebody that's in need, you don't have to try to figure out if they really in need or not, even though every one of us try to do that. It's just natural. You just have, if the Lord places it on your heart to help somebody, we're blessed. Each and every one of us are. The worst off in the United States is better than the best off in many countries in this world. And that's the truth. So that's why it says that help folks out. Anybody? Got anything else? So we'll get it soon. You know there's nothing else to say. Anybody? Good job. All right, let's get some prayer requests on. Yes, sir.
I lay in school. Two friends from school, one of them had a broken arm. He broke both bones and it was just hanging there.
Huh? Yes, sir, Doc. Sounds like everything's looking pretty good. Thank the Lord for that. We'll keep praying for, y'all do remember now, keep praying for Don and George's grandpa and grandpa. They both need your prayers, and it's helping. Prayer helps. It really does. It's It's been important.
My dad, my mom.
Yes, Miss Ann.
Granny and my day's recital.
Gotcha. Yes, Miss Piper. Gotcha. Yes, Mr. Seas. Nanny? Jenny. Y'all ain't figured out, if I'm not seeing your mouth, I'm probably not hearing you. Unless you're really loud. All right, anybody else?
Remember Faith? She has. Oh yeah, Faith.
Faith gets to go see how her hand's doing tomorrow.
And the people at Summer Game that I said, be safe and have good sportsmanship.
I like that.
Would I be able to play the games?
And hey, we'll pray that your mama has enough energy to walk the 15 miles. And we done here tomorrow. I'm not even gonna ask the Lord to give her quit walking, just to give her the strength to do it. Yes, ma'am. Nanny? All right, we got any more? Yes, sir, Mr. Seas. All the people that's working, amen to that. Hey, and how about we pray that a lot more people go to work?
Yes.
Who said that? Gas prices go down?
Amen to that.
It's because they had.
Hey, the good news is that, you know, people always, we tend to see the negative, but I will tell y'all this. Constantly on Tom Thumb, the gas prices dropped 4 cents from yesterday to today. So there, right along. It's still $3.18 a gallon. Come on.
Still dying in that, but man, that'll disappoint her.
Hey, we can't have anybody upset.
That we actually have that.
Hey, I mean, actually,
A lot of this federal and all.
well, the thing is, one thing that's nice about living in a small town, a rural area, is a lot of times, by the time we hear the news that we're supposed to be panicking about gas, it's already gone. That's a good thing. Hey, just pray for people to have good sense. All right, any more prayer requests? Anybody there?
I had this.
Y'all about the same time.
Melissa,
How's she doing?
the weather's not good on it, but
She probably always gonna have time.
otherwise, good weather.
Just like,
I have a girl in my teacher, this is my second time teacher, her stepdad passed away, last week, and she's helped care for him for the past year, he's been sick. She is truly grieving, and I'm not gonna call her name, but the Lord knows who she is.
absolutely. tell you, if you've never driven 331 up through there, that is a wide open rough place. I mean, people just, they're getting way too big for her. They really like me when I'm doing like 48 or 50 miles an hour down the road. Boy, I get honks and everything up, but you know what? If we get in a crash, we ain't hitting near as hard. So, yes, sir. It's called character builder. Yes, ma'am.
My great little brother, he's like 3, but he was born with a hole right here.
Cleft lip.
And he has to get surgery.
That is, usually takes a lot. If anybody remembers,
His name's Michael.
if anybody remembers the Robertson family, Duck Dynasty fame, Jason's daughter, Missy's daughter, Mia, had a really bad cleft lip, cleft palate failure. She just went through what's hopefully the last surgery she'll ever have to have now. So it's been a real big success. A lot of times I don't bring up, prayer requests and stuff like that, but just because they're rich and famous don't mean that they're not Christian folks.
And they're starting a new, television series.
They are some, home with Robertsons, and they're involved in different things. Missy, Jason's wife, she's big in the women's ministry stuff. Got a lot of stuff that goes on. But I mean, even though they are big and famous and rich and all those things, that don't change the fact that they need prayer like this. And but that thing that's great about them is they use their platform a lot of times to help and reach out to others. So Mia's story is a pretty good inspirational story. She's definitely a trooper. And speaking of that, a professional fisherman that follows his wife recently had a stroke. Christian folks, good people.
Who was it?
Jimmy Houston. He's an older man. They're older folks, but they love the Lord. They praise the Lord regardless of what's going on, and they have been this, and they've asked for a lot of prayer. There's a lot of good giving going on there. But always remember, just because we don't personally know them and they're rich and famous, that don't mean they don't need prayer. They need prayer just as much as they need prayer. So hold them up anytime that you see things that need to be prayed for. All right. Anybody? Would anybody like to lead us in prayer tonight? Will? I always count on you, huh? You got it, buddy. Bow our head,